Hello, world history students. Today's lecture is on Unit 4, Part 2, and this is the spread of Islam. You might remember that Muhammad was engaged in fighting first as the people of Mecca tried to attack him in Medina, and then he was able to defeat them and actually go back to Mecca and defeat the Meccans. And from there, his ideas, Islam, started to spread. It spread throughout Arabia, as you can see in the map down there. Also, by about 661, then after a very short period of time, the Muslims had conquered a very large territory. It really was expanding into areas that we had talked about before, into Persia, for example, what used to be the Persian Empire to the north and to the east of Arabia, and then also up into to the west parts of what was the former Eastern Roman Empire, or the Byzantine Empire. We'll talk about that in the next unit. And it spread by arms, or it spread as Muslim armies were conquering these places, but people who were conquered, many of them converted to Islam because it preached equality among social classes. And in some ways, it was like Christianity. You might remember that Christianity was popular because it appealed to the lowest classes and kind of preached an equality. And this is kind of a similar thing. Now, there are people who are Christian, there are people who are Jewish that the Muslim armies were taking over. And the Muslims were really pretty tolerant of people who they believed were descendant of, theologically speaking, or religious, in terms of religious ideas, were related to Abraham, that person who made a covenant with God to start Judaism, and of course Christianity is kind of an offshoot of Judaism. And so they were really quite tolerant of people of the book, as they called people who believed similar things to them. There was a kind of falling out, or there was a kind of division between different kinds of Muslims pretty quickly, actually. There are at least two very large groups, or larger groups of Muslim people today that are different sects or different types of Islam. And one of those groups, the smaller group, is called the Shia, or Shiites, and they believe that the successor of Muhammad, or the Caliph, should be a descendant of Muhammad, should be related to him in some way. Now, this is nowadays a minority, and it's always been kind of a minority view, and only about 13% or so of Muslims today are Shia Muslims. The vast majority of Muslim people are Sunni, and Sunni people believe that the Caliph, or the descendant of Muhammad, or the successor of Muhammad, should be chosen by the Muslim community leaders. They don't have to have a direct connection to Muhammad. They don't have to be, descendant of his brother-in-law or descendant of Muhammad himself. This group today makes up about 87% of Muslims. And there are, sadly, times when even today there's violence between these two groups, as usually the majority group is picking on the minority group, or different kinds of Muslims are fighting. If you look at the map, you can see that Sunni Muslims are in this sort of lighter blue color, and then the darker reddish color is the area where the Shia live. And so Shia basically are in today's Iran for the most part, and then a little bit of Iraq. Those are the important parts. And we'll probably revisit this conflict at the very end of the year. There was a really successful Muslim trade network at this point in time. We've talked a lot about roads and the Silk Road and how trade is very important as we've gone along here in world history class. This Muslim trade network was successful for a number of different reasons. One of the advantages of Islam is that there is a common language, Arabic, in terms of the Quran, the holy book. And so Arabic became a language of trade as well for people. There was also one currency, the dinar, that enabled people to be quite comfortable buying and selling things. There were also banks, like we had seen with the Gupta Empire, the creation of banks, and then they even had a kind of early check, something uh, that would be worth money but wasn't a pile of gold or a pile of silver. You could take that check back to a bank, and it would be worth money, and people um, trusted that, and it's a really nice innovation or kind of modern way of buying and selling things. You have to remember that the Middle East was still this crossroads between East and West. And so, they are the middleman between the products of Africa and the products of Asia and to some extent the products of Europe. And they can make a lot of money by purchasing things from China, for example, for the Chinese and bringing them to the Africans, or taking things from the Africans, buying things from the Africans and bringing them to Europe. They have also the Indian Ocean, which is between Africa and India, basically. And then also the Mediterranean Sea, which is where we had, just below where the Greeks and the Romans had lived and north of the Egyptians. So those bodies of water were filled with people of the Muslim faith or the Islamic faith, and taking products from one place to another. And of course, access to the Silk Roads is also really quite important. The Abbasid Empire is the name of one of two early Muslim empires or Islamic empires. And its social structure was really quite interesting because it was based upon religion in many ways. That the highest people, oftentimes we talk about the highest people being emperors and princes and landowners and so on. But the social classes were really based upon religion. And so there were, at the highest uh, part of the social hierarchy, there were Muslims who had been born Muslims, and then beneath them were Muslim converts, people who had become Muslim during their life. And then there were people who weren't Muslim, but as I said, they are these kind of people of the book, or the protected peoples, Christians and Jews, and even Zoroastrians from Persia. Beneath them were slaves, and the slaves were all non-Muslim people. You couldn't have a Muslim person as a slave. The Abbasids also had, oftentimes we see this in world history, a patriarchal society where men are above women. And in the Quran, it says that men are the managers of the affairs of women. But at the same time, it also says that men and women are equal as believers. So there's kind of a mixed message there. You should know that women could own property, and women could work, and women could divorce their husbands. And so there were some rights that women had. But in general, like most civilizations, women are kind of second-class people. Once again, Arabic is the common and unifying language of the Islamic world. It is the language of the Quran, or of the holy text, that was revealed to Muhammad through the angel Gabriel, and it's written in a kind of poetry, and this is a part of the Bedouin culture that they were really wrote a lot of poetry, or recited a lot of poetry, really, in their desert encampments, and the Quran is written in this kind of poetry as well. There's also this famous story from this point in time called 1001 Nights. It is 1001 stories that short stories that were allegedly told by a princess to or queen to her king. Um, there are things like the story of Aladdin, if you know that story. Muslim art is really quite interesting because there aren't depictions of people. There is a prohibition, or it's forbidden to have an image of God or Allah. It's frowned upon, or prohibited to have an image of Muhammad. And so art that you find um, in Muslim structures or in mosques is oftentimes just really nice patterns rather than people. And so you don't have the same kind of religious art that you might see in a Christian church. Muslim architecture looks like this. It's really pretty intricate and looks really quite nice. You can see, once again, all of those patterns inside and then on the outside. Very large structures oftentimes and very symmetrical structures, very even structures and really pretty impressive. There is this thing called the House of Wisdom, which is created around 800, and it is created in Baghdad, sort of the center of the Abbasid Empire, and it is a kind of catch-all of library and scientific academy and translation center, in which texts from all over the place, texts from places that the Muslim people came in contact with, the Muslim people had spread Islam to, are brought to this House of Wisdom and translated into Arabic, so texts from Greek and Indian and Persian sources, trying to create a sort of world center of knowledge. And this is really quite important because when Rome falls, there were a lot of texts that the Greeks had written, that the Romans had collected, and when Rome fell to the Germanic barbarians, all of those texts were lost. And so later, when the Europeans were looking to find those lost Greek texts, they could find them in Arabic sources that had been translated at the House of Wisdom. There were a number of astronomical discoveries, or at least astronomy was something that Muslim people appreciated a great deal because Ramadan, the holy month, and the Hajj, when the Hajj is, are both based on a lunar calendar instead of a solar calendar. That's why it moves around through the year from time to time, and so they needed to know quite a bit about the moon. They also needed to know which direction Mecca was because there are prayers that are done 5 times a day in the direction of Mecca. So, you imagine somebody who is west of Mecca praying to the east and somebody who is the east of Mecca praying to the west. They need to know the right direction. Therefore, they need to know a little bit something about the sky and where things are to find the direction of Mecca. They also spent a lot of time trying to figure out how the world worked. They started to do a kind of scientific examination, and the Muslim scientists, unlike the Greek scientists just sort of thought about things. People like Aristotle just sort of thought about things and then came up with the way the world worked. The Arab or the Muslim scientists were actually experimenting, as you know, using the scientific method by experimenting, using math, using observation, and so on, is a better way of figuring out how the world works. One of the mathematical discoveries was algebra, which is al-jabar in Arabic. So that was really quite helpful if you like algebra. And then there was this doctor by the name of Al-Razi, who, once again, it was kind of like the House of Wisdom, where he's compiling all of this knowledge from Greek, Syrian, and Arabic and Indian sources to try to come up with the best ways of treating people for their various ailments. And you can imagine that those were semi-successful. It was a long time ago, and so medical treatments aren't always great, but it was kind of cutting edge from the time. Well, I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I hope that you got what you needed from for the essential questions. Have a nice day.